Many people spend their entire lives believing that having a salary is the same as having security. And at first glance, this even seems true. Every month, the money lands in the account, the bills are paid, the routine continues, and the person feels in control. But it is precisely here that one of the greatest financial illusions of adult life resides. A salary gives a sense of stability, but it almost always comes with a ceiling. It is born limited. It arrives already with a destination marked. Even before it reaches your hands, a portion already belongs to rent, another to electricity, another to the grocery store, another to commitments that repeat endlessly. And at the end of the month, what is left is so little it can barely breathe. This is the point that many people take years to realize. Salary and income are not the same thing. A salary is a fixed value. Income is a flow that can grow. A salary depends on your time, your effort, your presence. Your body waking up early, facing pressure, traffic, targets, demands, and exhaustion. Income, on the other hand, can go beyond that. It can multiply. It can come from more than one source. It can keep coming in even when you are not directly exchanging hours for money. Nobody builds true wealth living only off the value someone else decided to pay for your month. This is a truth that unsettles because it touches a structure that many people learn to accept without questioning. From an early age, most were taught to study, get a good job, work with discipline, and wait for things to sort themselves out over the years. Yet in practice, what often happens is different. The person works hard, grows older, carries ever greater responsibilities, but remains trapped in a model where they always need to ask permission to grow. Permission to earn more. Permission to take vacation. Permission to have a day off. Permission even to dream a little bigger. This kind of financial dependence is dangerous because it looks normal. It comes well-dressed, organized, socially accepted. It does not look like a prison because there are no visible chains. But it is still a life limited by decisions that are not entirely your own. When someone depends exclusively on a salary, their future becomes tied to external structures, the company, the boss, the market, the economy, the mood of whoever does the hiring, the instability of a system that can change at any moment. And when that happens, the person realizes too late that they spent years believing they were safe, when in reality they were merely conditioned. That is why this provocative comparison makes such an impact. The modern model has softened the appearance of dependence, but has not eliminated its essence. Before, the control was crude, direct, visible. Today it comes in the form of an ID badge, a calendar, a monthly payment, and a promise of stability. Everything seems more comfortable, more polished, more acceptable. But deep down, there is still an exchange in which the person gives the best of their energy and receives in return only enough to keep functioning within the same system. And the problem is not work itself. Working with dignity is honorable. The mistake lies in believing that work alone is enough to financially free someone. It is not, because wealth is not born only from effort. Wealth is born above all from the way effort is converted into construction. If all the fruit of your work serves only to maintain your survival, then you are running very hard just to stay in the same place. That is why so many people feel exhausted, even when they are responsible. They do everything right, but they do not advance. They keep their hours, take on commitments, pay their bills, avoid problems, and still cannot transform their own work into assets. And when work does not become assets, it disappears in time. The month ends, the salary ends, and everything starts over from zero. Again, and again, and again. The great turning point happens when the person understands that a salary may be the beginning of the journey, but can never be the finish line. There is something very quiet that happens inside many families, and almost no one notices while they are living it. One generation grows up watching the other survive in the same way. The grandfather worked for a salary. So did the father. Then the child grows up hearing that the best path is to find a secure job, hold on, pay the bills on time, and go through life without asking too many questions. In this way, without realizing it, an invisible chain forms. Not a chain of iron, a chain of habit, of repetition, of inherited thinking. And when an idea is repeated for many years inside the same household, it begins to look like absolute truth. The problem is that many people call destiny what is in reality merely a repeated pattern. The person looks at their own life and thinks, in my family, it was always this way. And by hearing this so many times, they begin to believe that no other path exists. As if being born into an environment of financial limitations meant dying inside it too. As if the story were already written. As if the most anyone could do was endure life as best they could, without ever truly changing it. But the truth is different. Starting with a salary can be normal. And for many people, it is indeed the first step. There is no shame in that. Every great growth begins somewhere. The mistake is not in starting small. The mistake is in deciding to remain small out of fear, habit, or lack of vision. A salary can be the foundation, but it should never be the ceiling of someone's life. It can help organize the present, but it cannot be the only hope for the future. This is where a very powerful, very practical, and very transformative idea comes in. One similar to what Robert Kiyosaki has been teaching for so many years. Financially wise people understand that working for money is only the beginning. The next step is to make money start working for them. And that does not happen by chance. It does not happen simply because time has passed. It does not happen because the person has grown older. It requires a decision. It requires a change of mindset. It requires the courage to interrupt a cycle that seemed normal within an entire family. Think of how many people spend decades making the same movement. They receive, pay, tighten, postpone dreams, start over the following month, and call that adult life. Then their children watch that routine and learn without anyone needing to explain. They learn that living tired is normal, that not having enough money is normal, that always depending on a paycheck is normal, that growing old worried is normal. But what is common is not always healthy. What is repeated is not always right. And what looks like tradition is sometimes just an absence of rupture. Breaking this pattern requires a special kind of courage, because working harder is not enough. It requires thinking differently. It requires looking at money not just as something that comes and goes, but as a tool for construction. It requires stopping seeing income merely as life maintenance and starting to see it as raw material to buy freedom. While most people use their salary only to sustain the present, those who grow financially begin to use part of it to build the future. That is the turning point. The person stops living just to pay bills and starts putting together structure. Stops thinking only about this month's invoice and starts thinking about the assets of years ahead. Stops acting like someone who only needs to survive and starts acting like someone who wants to grow, protect their family, and leave something stronger than what they received. Because at the end of the day, no one is obligated to remain where they started. You may have been born into a family where everyone was salaried employees. You may have grown up seeing scarcity, fear, and limitation. You may have heard for years that wealth is for other people. But none of that needs to define the end of your story. The beginning may have been ordinary, but the ending can be different. And it all begins when the person understands that a salary is not an eternal prison. It is merely a starting point. From there, they need to build the next step. When someone truly understands this, they stop repeating the life they inherited and finally begin to create the life they want to leave as a legacy. At many moments in life, a person may even hear beautiful words about prosperity. They listen to messages of hope, words of victory, promises of change, strong declarations about a better future. And all of that may even animate them for a few moments. It can lift their spirits, renew their breath, and make them leave feeling emotionally stronger than when they arrived. But there is a problem when everything stops there. Because enthusiasm without direction does not build wealth. Emotion without strategy does not pay off debt. And words that do not turn into practical action do not change a family's reality. Many people were raised to believe that wanting something very much is almost the same as building it, as if repeating positive phrases by itself were enough to reorganize a disordered financial life, as if waiting for a great turning point moment would resolve years of poorly planned decisions. But true prosperity is not born from hope alone. It needs understanding, it needs structure, it needs concrete steps, because life does not improve merely when a person believes they can win. Life improves when, in addition to believing, they learn what needs to be done and begin doing it consistently. This is a common mistake, seeking only comfort while fleeing from instruction, seeking words that console while rejecting words that demand responsibility. After all, hearing that good things can happen is pleasant. Hearing that habits will need to change, excesses will need to be cut, more studying will be needed, better planning will be required, and disciplined action must be taken. That does not always sound so exciting. And it is precisely at this point that many people stall. They want the result, but avoid the process. They want prosperity, but without organization. They want abundance, but without preparation. They want to harvest without having planted. In practice, this creates a life of expectation without construction. The person lives waiting for progress, but develops no foundation to sustain it. And when some extra money comes in, it disappears quickly because there is no mental structure to maintain and multiply it. It is like filling a leaky bucket. No matter how much water you pour in, it always escapes. In the same way, no matter how much money passes through the hands of someone who has not learned to manage, protect, and direct resources, it all goes away. For this reason, a mature vision of prosperity cannot remain only on the surface. It needs to enter the realm of practice. It needs to teach how to escape dependence, how to transform income into assets, how to organize a budget, how to make smarter choices, how to build something that will still be standing in 5, 10, or 20 years. This is the kind of teaching that truly changes destinies, because it does not merely deliver momentary emotion, it delivers tools. And here, there is an important detail. Many people like the idea of being blessed, but do not always like the idea of being trained. Because training disturbs the comfort zone. It forces a review of old habits. It forces the abandonment of waste that seemed normal. It forces the admission that, in many moments, the problem was not only a lack of opportunity, but also a lack of preparation. And that is a hard truth to swallow. Yet at the same time, it is also liberating. Because when the person understands that they need to learn, they realize they can grow. And when they realize they can grow, they stop being at the mercy of luck. Wealth is not built with strong phrases alone. It is built with vision, method, and the repetition of correct attitudes. It is not enough to say you want a better life. It is necessary to develop the capacity to manage it when it arrives. It is not enough to desire expansion. It is necessary to become someone capable of sustaining it. It is not enough to dream of abundance. It is necessary to abandon mindsets that sabotage any progress. That is why so many people remain in the same place for years, even while frequently hearing inspiring messages. They leave animated but return home without a plan. They feel moved but change no behavior. They become emotional but keep spending the same way, thinking the same way, and deciding the same way. Over time, the excitement fades and life continues exactly the same. True transformation begins when the person stops seeking only words that make them feel good and starts seeking teachings that make them genuinely grow. because feeling good for one night is easy. Difficult, and at the same time powerful, is learning something that reorganizes your mind, strengthens your decisions, and changes the financial direction of your household forever. When that understanding arrives, prosperity stops being just a beautiful speech and begins to become a real-life project. There is an enormous difference between hearing something that excites and learning something that transforms. Many people spend years looking for phrases that give them courage, words that bring emotion, and messages that lift the heart for a few minutes. And indeed, that may have some value in that instant. It can rekindle hope, restore energy, and make the person believe there is still a way out. But the great issue is that motivation alone does not sustain a life change. It ignites, but does not maintain. It propels, but does not structure. It energizes the beginning, but does not guarantee continuity. That is why so many people live in a tiring cycle. They become excited today, but tomorrow return to the same mistakes. They feel that this time will be different, but keep making decisions identical to those from before. They get emotional about the possibility of prospering, but flee from precisely what could take them there: solid learning, daily discipline, and patience to build. They want quick results, yet do not accept the real pace of growth. They want to harvest early, even without having planted properly. They want to live a turnaround, but avoid the process that produces that turnaround. This is one of the greatest conflicts in financial life. Most people enjoy the feeling of being inspired, but few enjoy the responsibility of being taught. Because truly learning requires humility. It requires acknowledging that wanting more money is not enough. It is necessary to understand how money works. It is necessary to study how it comes in, how it goes out, how it multiplies, and how it disappears when it falls into the hands of someone who does not know how to manage it. And this already changes everything, because at that point, the person stops treating money as something emotional and begins treating it as a tool. Many people prefer quick formulas because they seem easier. They seem less painful. They seem lighter than sitting down, analyzing one's own life, reviewing habits, cutting excesses, making a plan, learning about assets, understanding cash flow, separating investment from consumption, and accepting that wealth is not born in a weekend. But the truth is simple. Those who spend their lives looking for shortcuts almost always end up going in circles. And those who reject instruction for seeming slow usually spend years stuck in the same place. Robert Kiyosaki always reinforces a very powerful idea. It is not enough to work for money. It is necessary to understand the game of money. And that understanding is not born from passing emotion. It is born from financial education. It is born when the person trades impulse for strategy, when they stop wanting only to appear prosperous and start learning how to actually become prosperous. Because prosperity is not a state of enthusiasm. Prosperity is an intelligent construction. See how this plays out in practice. A person receives an extra sum of money, and because they have not been trained to think financially, spends almost all of it trying to feel like they have succeeded. They buy what impresses, take on what weighs them down, display what they cannot sustain. For a few days, they seem to be advancing, but soon they return to the same difficulty as before. Another person, faced with the same sum, stops, thinks, organizes, directs it, and asks, how can this money help me leave where I am and take me to where I want to go? That second person may not seem as excited at first, but they are building something far stronger. They traded emotion for direction. Motivation speaks to the moment. Teaching speaks to the future. Motivation can draw applause. Teaching changes behaviors. Motivation makes a person leave saying their life is going to change. Teaching shows exactly what they need to do tomorrow morning for that change to truly begin. And this is where many give up, because learning requires consistency. It requires repeating what works until the new behavior becomes part of one's identity. At the end of the day, many people do not fail for lack of desire to win. They fail because they want to win without training. They want to grow wealthy without learning. They want to harvest financial freedom while keeping the same disorganized mind they have always had. But a mind without preparation destroys even good opportunities. Without discipline, money escapes. Without instruction, profit turns into waste. Without knowledge, the person works harder but keeps building very little. That is why those who truly want to change their lives need to stop chasing only what makes them feel something and start valuing what teaches them something. They need to trade urgency for process. They need to accept that solid growth is almost always less noisy than easy promises. And they need to understand that lasting wealth is not born from intense emotion, but from consistent decisions made many times, even when no one is watching. It is at that point that life truly begins to change. When the person stops being merely someone impressed by strong speeches and becomes someone trained to build, protect, and multiply what they conquer. There comes a moment when the person needs to understand a truth that completely changes their relationship with money. Prosperity is not born only from beautiful words, nor from loose hope, nor from desires repeated without direction. Prosperity is born when someone decides to act with strategy. Because wanting a better life is important, but that alone builds nothing. What builds is organized decision. It is movement with purpose. It is knowing where you want to go and starting, in a concrete way, to occupy that space. Many people dream of a prosperous life, but keep living in a way that will never lead them there. They want stability, but do not organize their finances. They want growth, but do not buy anything that generates value in the future. They want security, but do not build assets. They want a big change, but act in small, confused, and unplanned ways. And it is precisely there that so many remain stuck for years, not for lack of desire, but for lack of positioning. When one speaks of true prosperity, something many people avoid comes into play: acquisition, construction, organization, planning. And this frightens some people because it seems to demand more responsibility than they were willing to assume. After all, it is easier to talk about abundance than to sit down and do the math. It is easier to repeat that you want to grow than to cut waste in order to buy something of real value. It is easier to imagine a great turnaround than to spend years building assets piece by piece. But that is exactly how wealth begins to take shape. Not magically, not instantly. It happens when the person starts to understand that prosperity needs to gain body in the real world. It needs to show up in practical decisions. It needs to show up in land purchased with awareness, in assets acquired with vision, in reserves built with discipline, in organization done before the crisis arrives, in money that stops being merely consumption and begins to become a foundation. That is why so many people talk about prosperity, but few actually reach it, because reaching it requires concrete action. It requires stopping treating money only as a survival tool and starting to treat it as an instrument of construction. It requires looking at what has been received and asking, how can this become something greater tomorrow? That question is powerful because it completely changes the way one lives. Instead of thinking only about immediate relief, the person begins to think about structure. Instead of looking only at the present, they begin to organize the future. Robert Kiyosaki always hammers this point in a very clear way. Those who want to grow financially need to learn to buy assets, not merely accumulate expenses disguised as achievements. And here lies one of the most important turning points of financial maturity, because there is a great difference between acquiring something that weighs you down and acquiring something that strengthens you. One drains, the other sustains. One demands constant maintenance and returns nothing. The other can generate security, income, appreciation, and peace of mind as time passes. Think of someone who receives money and uses all of it to feed appearances. On the outside, it looks like progress. On the inside, it is fragility. Now think of someone who uses part of what they receive to build assets, organize documents, buy with discernment, protect what they already own, and prepare for the next step. Perhaps that person does not attract as much attention at first. Perhaps no one applauds their quiet choices, but they are the one assembling a foundation that could sustain their family for many years. Prosperity is not noise. Prosperity is structure. It is not only talking about owning, it is positioning oneself to own. It is not merely desiring opportunity, it is also preparing to recognize it and seize it when it appears. It is not only waiting for open doors, it is also building the right key, learning to enter, and knowing what to do once inside. And this requires a deep shift in posture. The person stops being someone who merely roots for better days and becomes someone who participates in building those days. They stop looking at money as something that simply comes and goes and start seeing it as a seed. And a seed was not made to be fully consumed on the very same day. Part of it needs to be saved, planted, tended, and protected, because that is what tomorrow's harvest is born from. The great mistake many people make is wanting to enjoy the shade of a tree without ever accepting the process of planting one. They want shade, but refuse to wait. They want fruit, but will not prepare the soil. They want abundance, but without order. Yet serious prosperity requires exactly that: preparation, direction, patience, and concrete action. It requires buying with intelligence. It requires organizing before expanding. It requires planning before taking on greater commitments. It requires stopping the habit of only reacting to the month and starting to build the year, the future, the legacy. In the end, wealth is not something that simply happens to those who want it badly enough. Wealth is something that is claimed by those who position themselves for it, by those who learn, by those who organize, by those who buy wisely, by those who act in the real world with long-term vision. And when someone finally understands this, they stop living on speeches and start living by decisions that little by little change the destiny of their entire household. From that point on, everything begins to become clearer, because the investment mindset is not a luxury for those who already have a great deal of money. It is, in fact, the bridge that separates those who spend their entire lives chasing money from those who begin, little by little, to put money to work, chasing results. And this shift begins inside the mind, long before it shows up in a bank account. First, the way of thinking changes, then the way of deciding changes, and finally, the way of living changes. The first mark of this mindset is very simple to understand, yet powerful when put into practice: to stop asking only, "How much does this cost?" and to start asking, "How can this multiply?" That question changes everything, because most people look at money only as something to use. They receive it and immediately think about paying, buying, resolving, consuming. Those who develop an investment mindset begin to look at every amount as a possibility for expansion. They do not see just a banknote, they see a seed. They do not see just a momentary resource, they see a starting point. This does not mean living in fear of spending or refusing to enjoy life. It simply means maturing the way one uses what they earn. It means understanding that not all money was made to disappear within the same month. Part of it needs to be sent to the future. Part of it needs to be trained to return larger. Part of it needs to leave the hands of those who only consume and enter the hands of those who build. When the person learns this, they begin to see opportunities where before they only saw inevitable expenses. The second mark of the investment mindset is learning to focus on assets rather than liabilities. This is one of the strongest ideas associated with Robert Kiyosaki, and it remains powerful precisely because it is simple. An asset is something that strengthens your financial life. It is something that helps you grow, protect your wealth, or generate money over time. A liability is something that weighs you down, drains you, and demands from you without returning financial strength. The problem is that many people spend years buying weight while believing they are buying progress. This is where one of the great traps of adult life lies. The person works hard, fights, gets through a difficult month, earns a little more, and instead of using that improvement to acquire something that will strengthen them, uses it to take on something that ties them down even more. Apparently they have moved up a level, but in practice, they have merely increased the size of their obligations. And this happens because for many, appearing prosperous is more urgent than becoming prosperous. But appearances do not withstand crises. Appearances do not protect families. Appearances do not generate income. Appearances only impress on the outside. Assets do not. Assets work in silence, but build genuine security. When someone matures financially, they begin to look at their own budget with more detachment and more wisdom. They start to see that every financial choice pushes their life in a direction. Either you buy something that demands more from you, or you buy something that helps you grow stronger. Either you take on a commitment that drains your next several years, or you make a move that can open new paths. And that difference, even if it seems small at first, accumulates over time until it creates entirely different destinies. The third mark of the investment mindset is perhaps the most transformative of all, reaching the point where money works for you rather than the other way around. That is the moment when the logic of financial life truly changes. Because up until then, the person was always in the role of someone who must get up, run, fight, and exchange effort for return. But when they begin to build assets, investments, wealth, and income streams that function beyond their direct work, something new starts to happen. Money begins to produce movement without depending exclusively on their presence. This is one of the great objectives of financial freedom. It does not mean never working again. It does not mean standing still waiting for miracles. It means creating a structure in which you are not the only engine of your own economic life. It means building foundations that continue functioning while you are resting, ill, aging, or simply dedicating time to your family. It means moving from the condition of someone who spends their life putting out fires to becoming someone who builds protection before the fire starts. Think of the peace that exists when a person knows they are not depending on a single source, a single salary, a single external decision to remain standing. That peace does not come from nowhere. It is built. It is born from years of smarter choices, quiet renunciations, more mature purchases, repeated planning, and silent discipline. While many want large results overnight, those who truly build freedom accept making small, correct moves for a very long time. The investment mindset at its core is this: training the mind to stop living only in the now. It is looking at money with a long-term perspective. It is refusing the rush of looking good in order to embrace the wisdom of growing strong. It is accepting that wealth does not begin when someone earns a lot, but when someone starts thinking differently about what they earn. And when that key turns, the entire life begins to reorganize itself. Because from that point on, the person is no longer working merely to survive until the next payment. They begin to build a system that little by little will be able to sustain them with more dignity, more peace of mind, and more freedom. At some point in life, nearly every worker hears the same promise, dressed up as security. Get a good job, contribute for years, wait for your retirement, and everything will be fine. It seems like a solid plan. It seems responsible. It even seems prudent. And for a long time, many people built their entire lives believing it. The problem is that the world has changed. The value of money changes, costs rise, crises arrive without asking permission, and what seemed sufficient yesterday no longer guarantees peace of mind tomorrow. That is why relying solely on a job and a pension can be a quiet risk. The job can be important, of course. It can organize the present, put food on the table, keep the household running, and give the person breathing room to start their journey. But when it becomes the only pillar sustaining the entire financial life, any tremor is frightening. It takes only one layoff, one company crisis, one market shift, one health problem, or even a reduction in income for the entire structure to shake. And when someone has built their entire life leaning on a single source, fear takes up residence within the daily routine. The person works, but works tense, receives a paycheck, but receives it feeling insecure, makes plans, but always with the feeling that everything can slip away. Retirement, in turn, is also often seen as a kind of final safe harbor, as if it were enough to wait for time to pass, and further down the road, tranquility would arrive automatically. But real life does not always work that way. Time erodes many things, including purchasing power. The money that today seems reasonable may be worth much less tomorrow. What used to cover an entire month may later not cover even half of it. And this is one of the great dangers of money left idle or of blind trust in passive plans. They give the feeling of protection, but they are often quietly losing their strength. It is like storing water in a bucket with a small leak. At first, you look and think everything is fine because there is still water inside. But slowly, almost without noticing, the level keeps dropping. In the same way, when a person merely accumulates without strategy, or depends on structures that do not grow with intelligence, they can spend years believing they are protected, when in reality they are merely watching their power quietly diminish. It is not just about having money, it is about keeping its value alive. Robert Kiyosaki always draws attention to something essential. Financial security is not born from depending on an external source, but from building assets that generate their own strength. That is the difference between waiting to be sustained by a system and starting to create your own foundation. When the person understands this, they stop seeing a job as a final destination and start seeing it as an initial tool. They stop treating retirement as the only hope and begin building a security that does not depend solely on future promises. This shift in vision is powerful because it returns responsibility to the person's own hands. Instead of living waiting for time to resolve everything, they begin to act while they still have the energy, clarity, and decision-making capacity to do so. Instead of leaving the peace of the future in the hands of others, they begin to assemble their own protection. Instead of trusting solely in what was programmed for them, they start creating additional paths, assets, supplementary income streams, well-directed reserves, investments thought through with intelligence. The great truth is simple: those who leave money idle for too long almost always find time working against them. But those who learn to move that money with wisdom begin to make time work in their favor. And that difference changes destinies. Because, in the end, the winner is not simply the one who worked many years. The winner is the one who used those years to build something that would remain solid, even when the pace of life changed. That is why the financially mature person does not build only income. They build defense. They do not build only a salary. They build structure. They do not build only a bearable present. They build a less vulnerable future. And when they finally understand that their security cannot live only in a badge or in a distant promise, they begin to make more serious, more strategic, and more liberating decisions. From that point on, the goal is no longer merely to survive until the next payment. The goal becomes building a life in which money does not sit idle losing value, nor does the person sit idle waiting to be rescued by a system. The focus shifts to building, protecting, and multiplying. Because those who truly desire financial peace must learn to create their own security with their own choices before urgency arrives. That is why money must be treated with seriousness, not with fear, but with awareness, not with guilt, but with responsibility. Every sum received carries a quiet question: what are you going to do with me? And the answer given to that question, repeated over years, shapes destinies. Those who live wastefully weaken their own household. Those who spend without wisdom sustain only the present. But those who learn to invest begin to build something that can remain standing, even when they no longer have the same strength as before. And this conversation, at its core, goes far beyond a bank account. Because in the closing of everything, there is an even more serious question. What legacy does a person leave behind when they are gone? That question unsettles because it forces a person to look at life with greater depth. It forces them to step out of the month and enter into history. It forces them to think not only about what was lived, but about what will be left behind. And many people avoid this reflection because it stirs uncomfortable truths. At the end of life, it does no good to have appeared prosperous if the family is left destitute. It does no good to have maintained a beautiful image if those who remain inherit only debts, confusion, dependence, and suffering. It does no good to have spent a lifetime chasing status if, when everything ends, there is no organization, no protection, no assets, no direction for those who continue. A financially wise life does not eliminate all the pain of farewell, but it can greatly reduce the practical burden that falls upon the family in difficult moments. When someone thinks about legacy, they begin to act with another level of responsibility. They come to understand that money does not serve only personal comfort, but also the interruption of bad cycles. It serves to break old repetitions. It serves so that children do not need to start from absolute zero. It serves so that the household has more dignity, more stability, and less desperation. It serves so that future generations inherit more than beautiful phrases. They inherit order. They inherit awareness. They inherit structure. Some families receive an estate. Others receive only bills. Some families inherit direction, others inherit disorganization. Some families, even while mourning a loss, manage to get through that moment with a minimum of security because someone, long ago, thought with wisdom. And others, beyond the emotional pain, must still face financial chaos, urgency, fear, and improvisation. That difference is not born on the last day. It is built throughout an entire life, decision by decision. Breaking cycles of poverty between generations begins long before great fortunes. It begins when an ordinary person decides to think in an uncommon way. It begins when they stop using all the fruit of their effort merely to put out fires. It begins when they resolve to organize what they receive, invest part of what they earn, buy more wisely, plan more, show off less, and build with more quiet. It begins when they understand that they do not need to be rich tomorrow to already live today as someone who is financially wiser. The true legacy lies not only in the value left behind, but in the mindset that was built. Because even an estate can be lost when there is no education to sustain it. Therefore, beyond assets, a wise person leaves example, they leave principle, they leave discipline. They leave a new way of seeing money. They leave children and grandchildren looking at life and understanding that they were not born to repeat scarcity without questioning it. That they can work, yes, but also build. That they may start modestly, but they do not need to end up limited. That they can use money not as a master, but as a servant of a greater project. In the end, that is the great conclusion. A financially mature life is not the life of someone who simply earned a great deal. It is the life of someone who learned to direct well what they received. It is the life of someone who understood that a salary can start the journey, but it is investment and construction that change the destination. It is the life of someone who refused momentary shine to choose lasting strength. It is the life of someone who decided that their story would not end the same way as so many stories before it. So before closing, it is worth asking the most important question of all. When your journey ends, what will your family have in their hands because of the decisions you are making today? Only memories of someone who worked very hard and lived tight? Or proof that someone one day decided to break the cycle and build something better? If you enjoyed this content, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the next ones may help you see money with more clarity, build with more wisdom, and leave a far stronger legacy for your family.